Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 5 articles, 3, and I hope you enjoy this. November, the last Friday of the year, not just of December. First article we have is off Twitter response to Obama's sanctions. Yesterday, I brought you the breaking news on the sanctions that Obama has placed on Russia regarding the we have yet the here we go. Economic Russia interferes that Russia American election. 72 hours to make their exit on Friday, along with the counter on Russian embassy accounts. Prior to Obama as in A tweeted, if Washington takes new answer. Once the announcement of sanctions was made, Russia hit back at Obama. And we'll be glad to see the last of this hapless administration. The Russian embassy in the UK tweeted, President Obama expels 35 everybody, including American people, will be glad to see the last of this. UK tweeted on as as well. URLs are in the video, so you can pull them up and read some of that stuff for yourself. Do whatever research, look at whatever videos is included in some of these for yourself. The article continues with pinned to the top of the Russia in USA Twitter account is a video of Putin congratulating President-elect Donald Trump on his the day after the election. So there you have that article. The next one we have is off of EurasiaReview.com, and it says, confiscating gold and crackdown on terrorist financing. Hot on the heels of China's gold import restrictions, India's demonetization and gold confiscations, the European Commission proposed tightening controls on cash and precious metals transfer from outside the EU under the guise of shutting down one route for funding of militant attacks on the continent following the Berlin Christmas attack. China has already begun de facto gold import restrictions, and as Jayant Banarde detailed previously, India is experiencing a continuation of new social engineering notifications, each sabotaging wealth creation, confiscating people's wealth, and tyrannizing those who refuse to be part of the herd. In the process, destroying the very backbone of the economy and civilization. There are clearer signs that in every convoluted way, possession of gold for investment purposes will be made illegal. Expect capital controls to follow. And now, the Rutgers report, it appears last Monday's attack on Christmas market in Berlin, where 12 people were killed as a truck plowed into a crowd, has given the European Commission just the excuse to tighten capital controls, specifically cash and precious metals of Europe. It is part of an EU plan against terrorist financing unveiled after the bombings and shootings in Paris in November of 2015. Under the new proposals, custom officials in European Union states can step up checks on cash and prepaid payment cards sent by post or in freight shipments. Authorities will also be able to seize cash or precious metals carried by suspect individuals entering the EU. People carrying more than 10,000 euros, or it says 8,143.56 pounds in cash, already have to declare this at customs when entering the EU. The new rules would allow authorities to seize money below that threshold where there are suspicions of criminal activity, the EU Executive Commission said in a note. It said some of the recent attacks in Europe were carried out with limited funds, sometimes sent from outside the EU by criminal networks. Also considering whether to set up an EU-focused terrorist financing tracking program along the lines of the US-EU TFTP, which has long been opposed by EU lawmakers and privacy campaigners because it allows widespread checks and bank transfers. The plan complements Commission proposals after the Paris attacks to tighten controls on virtual currencies such as Bitcoin and prepaid cards. French authorities said were used to fund the bombings. EU state backed these proposals on Tuesday, which still needs European Parliament approval. Holders of prepaid cards would have to show some form of identity when they make the payments of 150 euros or more. But it gets better. The Commission also proposes common rules for the 28 EU countries on freezing terrorists' financial resources and on confiscating assets even from those thought to be connected to criminals. So cash, Bitcoin, precious metals, and prepaid cards over $150 are of terrorists and are now open to confiscation if you're a suspicious person, which by their rhetoric you are if you actually hold any of these assets. The next article that we have here is off of the economic collapse. And it says, circle January the 15th. 70 nations will gather in Paris to discuss the creation of a Palestinian state. 15th, representatives from 70 different countries will gather in Paris, France, for an unprecedented global conference. The stated goal of this conference is to promote a two-state solution as the way that lasting peace will be brought to the Middle East. In Israel, there is a tremendous amount of concern that whatever is agreed upon at this conference will immediately be used as the basis for a UN Security Council resolution that would permanently divide the land of Israel and create a Palestinian state. But things would have to move very rapidly in order for that to happen, because Barack Obama's time in the White House comes to an end on January the 20th, and Donald Trump has already made it exceedingly clear that he would never support such a resolution. Council resolution on Friday was one of the most significant events that we'd witnessed in decades. Resolution 2334 made all Israeli settlements in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem illegal. It set the 1967 ceasefire lines at the border between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and it granted every single inch of East Jerusalem to the Palestinians. But it stopped short of giving official UN Security Council recognition to a Palestinian state. And that is why this conference on January the 15th is so important. On Wednesday, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will lay out a plan which many believe will serve as the blueprint for an upcoming conference in Paris. I discussed yesterday. Apparently, Kerry has been working on this for quite some time, and according to the Times of Israel, Jewish officials are fearful that he may propose something drastic. Briefing Tuesday, State Department spokesman Mark Toner confirmed Kerry's plans for the speech, though he refused to detail whether the top U.S. diplomat would use the opportunity to announce a new American initiative, which officials in Jerusalem fear he may. The Secretary holds the conviction that it is his duty in his remaining weeks and days as Secretary of State to lay out what he believes is a way towards a two-state solution. That is, it's always important to keep the process moving forward. If Kerry's plan is embraced by the conference in Paris, it is anticipated by many that it would serve as the basis for a UN Security Council resolution that would formally create a Palestinian state before Donald Trump is inaugurated on January the 20th. The following comes from The Guardian. The government is reportedly fearful that any guidelines agreed in Paris will be turned into another UN resolution before Trump's inauguration. It has ratcheted up its rhetoric, presenting itself as the victim of an international conspiracy. A spokesman for Netanyahu claimed to have ironclad evidence that the Obama administration had plotted behind the scenes to promote the UN resolution. Has said it will present evidence against the Obama administration to the incoming Trump team. Egyptian newspapers claiming is true, then there may very well be an international conspiracy at work against Israel. According to a transcript published by the Al-Yawm al-Sheba newspaper, John Kerry and U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice met with Palestinian officials in early December and presented Kerry's plan to them at that time. In a meeting in early December with top Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry told the Palestinians that the U.S. was prepared to cooperate with the Palestinians at the Security Council, Israel's Channel 1 TV said, quoting the Egyptian Al-Yawm al-Sheba newspaper. Also present at the meeting were U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice and director of the Palestinian Authority's General Intelligence Service. Kerry is quoted as saying that he could present his ideas for a final status solution if the Palestinian pledge they will support the proposed framework. Advised the Palestinians to travel to Riyadh to present the plan to the Saudi leaders. The Obama administration is denying all of this, of course, but if it's true, then the betrayal of Israel by Obama is much deeper than any of us realized. With less than a month to go in his presidency, Barack Obama has decided to launch an all-out attack on Israel. 2334 passed, and the uproar against it was limited. That emboldened the Obama administration to go for broke. Now it looks like they actually could try to get a Palestinian state created before he leaves office on January the 20th. And if that happens, it will be absolutely catastrophic for America. You see, the truth is that we've been warned for many years that our land will be divided after the land of Israel is officially divided into two states. Many of us have been watching for the creation of a Palestinian state for a very long time, and now we may be right on the verge of it happening. Office, he would not be able to reverse a creation of the Palestinian state. But one thing that he could do, the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. If that happens, the Palestinians are promising to throw a massive temper tantrum. When asked how the Palestinians would react if Trump carried out his promise to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, Erekat reportedly said the Palestinian Liberation Organization would rescind its recognition of Israel and ask the Arab states to expel their U.S. envoys. Erekat made precisely that threat on a December 19th conference call organized by the Wilson Center Policy Forum. He said he would immediately resign as the chief Palestinian negotiator and that the PLO will revoke its recognition of Israel as well as all previously signed agreements with Israel. Erekat, all American embassies in the Arab world would be forced to close, not necessarily because Arab leadership would want to close them, but because the infuriated public in the Arab world would not allow for embassies to continue to operate. What that's happening now is setting the stage for the biggest war in the Middle East that we've ever seen. So instead of this peace process being the solution, it's actually going to cause the Middle East to explode in violence. For a very long time, I've been warning that the worst days of the Obama era were still in front of us, and we are currently watching that play out right in front of our eyes. Israel is the worst thing that he's done during his entire time in the White House, and now America is greatly cursed as a result. The next article I have for you is off Zero Hedge, and it says, history shows how rare and valuable freedom of speech and freedom of the press are. We'll get this to scroll up a little bit here. Try to. There we go. Well, I thought so. There we go. The Founding Fathers protected freedom of speech and freedom of the press are the most important liberties. They are protected in the First Amendment to the Constitution. The founders recognized that the ability to speak freely was the foundation for all other freedoms. Thousands of years of history show how rare and valuable such freedoms really are. Socrates was killed in 399 BC for failing to acknowledge the gods that the government acknowledges. Before the invention of the movable type printing press by Gutenberg, the church controlled the products of books. Gutenberg's invention allowed cheap production of books. This challenged the monopoly on books by the church and thus allowed different viewpoints to be heard. For example, when Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses on a church door in Germany, criticizing the corrupt Catholic practice of selling indulgences, paying the church in return for a reduction of your time in purgatory. The printing press spread his writings throughout all of Germany in 2 weeks and throughout all of Christendom within a month. This launched the Protestant Reformation and challenged the power of the Catholic Church. So Pope Alexander VI issued an edict against unlicensed printing in 1501. And in 1535, Francis of France prohibited under penalty of death printing of any books. William Tyndale was killed in 1536 for translating the Bible into English so that everyone could read it for themselves and rely on the clergy to tell them what it said. Okay. In 1585, the Star Chamber assumed the right to confine printing to London, Oxford, and Cambridge, to limit the number of printers and presses, to prohibit all publications issued without proper license, to enter houses to search for unlicensed presses and publications. The search for unlicensed presses or publications was entrusted to an officer called the Messenger of the Press. In 1557, Henry II made the collecting of prohibited books punishable by death or imprisonment. He made it punishable by death to print without royal authority. In 1616 and 1633, Galileo was tried for saying that the earth revolves around the sun, with the church's mainstream view that the sun revolves around the earth. Many people have been killed over the centuries for saying anything the church authorities of the day disliked. And the British monarchy punished anyone caught with materials criticizing the monarchy, which they labeled as libelous or scandalous, even if what was written was true. Indeed, the ransacking of houses by authorities searching for heretical or libelous material was so common that it was the main reason the Founding Fathers wrote the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution prohibiting unreasonable search and seizure. In 1773, Ben Franklin was fired as Colonial Postmaster General for informing the American colonists about what the British were really doing. Strongmen of all stripes have cracked down anyone who insults the strongman or criticizes his policies. In 1933, the Nazis carried out numerous book burnings of authors such as Einstein, Freud, Kafka, Helen Keller, Jack London, Proust, Upton Sinclair, and H.G. Wells, because their writing book acts subversively on our future or strikes at the root of German thought, the German home, and driving forces of our people. There have been many other book burnings throughout history. Mussolini had around 2,000 people killed because they challenged the dictator. Stalin murdered or threw into insane asylums countless people who criticized the Soviet government or communism. And communist leaders killed people who failed to sign the great leader's praise. In 1972, CIA Director Richard Helms relabeled dissenters as terrorists. The extremely popular TV personality Phil Donahue's show, the most popular on MSNBC, was canceled for questioning the wisdom of the Iraq War. Indeed, many reporters have been fired, harassed, spied upon, and even accused of terrorism for reporting stories critical of government actions or policies. Those in power are always tempted to censor and punish critical speech and reporting. You're either with us or you're against us, and crack down on criticism and protest. Some powerful Democrats now want to suppress right-wing speech, but freedom of speech and of the press, no matter how much we may disagree with and even hate what someone else says, is the bedrock of America. If freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep to the slaughter, said George Washington. Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved and tyranny is erected on its ruins, said Ben Franklin. Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech, Ben Franklin. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech, Ben Franklin. The liberty of press is essential to the security of the state, John Adams. It's on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost, Thomas Jefferson. I am for freedom of the press and against all violations of the Constitution to silence by force and not by reason the complaints or criticisms, just or unjust, of our citizens against the conduct of their agents, Thomas Jefferson. The freedom of the press is one of the greatest bulwarks of liberty and can never be restrained by the despotic governments, George Mason. The power to censor more than any other ought to produce universal alarm because it is leveled against that right of freely examining public characters and measures and of free communication among the people thereon, which has ever been justly deemed only effectual guardian of every other right, James Madison. If there is any principle of the Constitution that more imperatively calls for attachment than any other, thought. Not free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr. Freedom of expression is the matrix principal condition of nearly every other form of freedom. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Benjamin Cardozo. The framers of the Constitution knew human nature as well as we do. They too had lived in dangerous days. They too knew the suffocating influence of orthodoxy and standardized thought. They weighed the restrained speech and thought against the abuses of liberty. They chose liberty. U.S. Supreme Court Justice William Douglas. To expose through discussion the falsehood and fallacies to avert the evil by the processes of education. The remedy to be applied is more speech, not enforced silence. Justice Louis D. Brandeis. The next article and final article in this episode that I have for you, this is off of uspostman.com. And I'm going to try to make this a little larger so we can read it here. Fine print. It says, this is the 6 Republicans who took secret payments from Hillary to destroy Donald Trump. Trump already knows who the snakes are in the GOP, and that's why he said early on that he didn't like McCain and that he liked not captured vets. People thought he was being mean, but he already knew McCain was a Hillary snake. Every day, the job of president-elect seems to become more danger-filled for Donald Trump. It can honestly be said that it looks like the entire establishment is out to destroy his presidency before it even gets off the ground. As we've said for months, all signs are pointing to Hillary Clinton working behind the scenes to further this coup. There's nothing less than bombshell in the swamp that is our U.S. government in Washington, with the curtains pulled back. It's now clear precisely what has happened. Tragically, new evidence has emerged that shows that despite their public differences, both parties are largely different shades of the same corrupt mud. New information from WikiLeaks is about to shake up the political world. Those in question are Republicans in name only, or rhinos. an email from John Podesta to Huma Abedin that was released as document number 1078645 is about to turn the speculation that certain prominent Republicans who opposed Donald Trump into the truth that they were, in fact, not just disloyal to Trump and the party, but were on Hillary Clinton's payroll. The email sent in July of this year describes how funds were being diverted from Clinton's campaign to super PACs of Jeb Bush, Carly Fiorina, and John Kasich. According to the email, it says, quote, JBCF and JK PACs will be noticeably silent for the rest of the campaign. Each will receive a significant allowance from an advertising budget. HRC is in the loop and has talked to all three personally, eyes only. Other emails that surface but do not refer to anything other than the title have also surfaced that raised eyebrows. It seems that at a glance, the Clinton Foundation, or as I'm calling it, the Pantsuit Mafia, has bought off several key members of the Republican Party to push the Clinton agenda, such as he's on board, will retract the investigation to speak, eyes only. This email was dated days before Speaker of the House Paul Ryan withdrew the invitation to Donald Trump to speak at an event in Wisconsin. Even though we don't have the smoking gun to say it was him, no other logical conclusion can be assumed. Other emails hint at the money being moved to Republican elected officials in the House and Senate. For instance, FEC reports show that 2 large donations from PACs and private sources in early October went to John McCain right after he attacked Trump publicly, criticizing Trump. That happened shortly after the slew of emails concerning moving money to support one candidate and move support from another. Shortly thereafter, his challenger in the race, or in the tight race, Kirkpatrick, lost several key donors and money and support lessened from the DNC and the DSCC in the last few weeks of the race. The thing to note is that McCain is one of the lead sponsors of a committee to investigate any Russian influence into the election. Senator Lindsey Graham, another outspoken critic of Donald Trump and briefly candidate for president from July to December, also, it seems, received help from the Clintons. An email that simply states, cleared the road for him in 2020, could mean that there will be no strong support or supported Democrat in the South Carolina Senate race when Graham is up for re-election. As with McCain, Graham has publicly called for a look into the Russian influence in the election. There were a lot of politicians who were opposed to Donald Trump. All share a common bond. However, Trump humiliated them on stage in front of hundreds of millions of people around the world. This is more than just politics or conscientious objecting. This was revenge. Not just revenge, it's out and out treason. Our representative took an oath to support our Constitution and its laws for our benefit, not theirs. This is why gridlock is prevalent in D.C. The treachery and corruption are on both sides of the aisle. Unfortunately, there's no way of knowing who the true Republicans are and who are the ones that are the fronts for the Clinton machine, the Pantsuit Mafia. The number of emails is too overwhelming to easily sift through all of them to find all of the turncoat rhinos. We must be diligent to ferret out those that have sold their souls for power. The only hope we have for transparency of the Clintons anytime soon rests in an audit carried out by the IRS. Behold, in recent days, there is a call to impeach the commissioner of the IRS. Interesting times we live in, to be sure. Only time and work on our part will push that audit forward. Even though Hillary lost the presidency, she is still a power behind the scenes with these revelations. With her Democratic allies in Pelosi and Schumer and the Republican lackeys in form of Ryan and other Republicans, she will set the agenda and pull the strings. We, the people, will have no idea who is on our side and who is not. The Soros-Clinton team will have killed the Republic, and we will never know until it's too late. The Russian news story perhaps is the ultimate coup for the Clinton camp. She does not even have to be the winner of the Electoral College vote to have gained power. Should enough electors defect to Hillary or name another candidate, their votes, electors are not legally bound to vote for the candidate, then that could throw the vote into the House and Senate. And I will interject here, we already know that that's not going to happen because the, the electors turned on Hillary. That kind of bit her in the fanny. The article continues, it says, the suspicious part of this simply is on January 20th, a new president will be inaugurated. The Constitution in the 25th Amendment spells out the line of succession. If there is still not a picked president, the vice president shall become president, Kane or Pence. If the Senate has not picked vice president by noon the 20th, Speaker of the House shall become president. Coincidence? The Roman Republic lasted for centuries in the hands of the people before falling to become the Roman Empire. That change did not happen by a foreign invasion or foreign intrigue. No barbarian or forceful enemy defeated that republic in over 2,000 years ago. It was defeated from the inside by the treachery of the Senate and the blood of the slain Julius Caesar. Just as Caesar was stabbed in the back by men he thought were his allies, Trump is facing the same treachery. So that is the last of the 5 articles that I have in this episode for you. If you like what we're doing, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media, be sure and subscribe. Click that little bell beside the subscribe button and check the box so that you get email messages every time I put a show up. And there's going to be 2 more this morning, so stay tuned. I'll see you in the next one.